Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have the Off the Post crew here today, so it should be fun. And we have a few things to discuss, a few news and notes from around the league. Obviously, this is the slow time of season. Team Team Canada, announced their roster for the World Junior Summer Showcase, 42 players. They kept Celebrini in sort of a separate category, which was interesting because probably they don't think they're going to get him because he's going to be with San Jose all year. But we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, just first thing I want to say, don't tell my cats I'm wearing this shirt. Thank you.
Meow.
So there's a name out there in sports now that I'm beginning to hate. And his name is Hassan Redick. And there's 2 weeks for him to kind of
we got a Jets griping session. Let's go.
See what he's going to do. Here's the way I would handle it if I were Joe Douglas. That day that camp starts, if he's there, great. Then there's an agreement. And if he's not there, I blank out his key card and I say, have a good one.
We do that same scene from Hard Knocks. Do it to him.
We don't need you. We're not paying you any more money. You've got 48 hours to show up, and if you don't, have a nice day.
Yeah, it's going to be the Willie Mays Hayes scene from Major League. He's going to wake up and his bed's going to be outside of the facility.
Right. That's what they should do, because there's no way in any world they should give him any more money. He should either want to play or don't play.
He thinks he was productive in Philly, but again, it's the same thing. Like Philly, I would have liked to have seen Redick back, certainly, but obviously he has a number set, and neither the Eagles were willing to meet it, and obviously right now the Jets have they're not negotiating at the moment.
Nope.
It's an interesting thing, certainly seeing him going from Philly under Roseman to Joe Douglas, who's his former, maybe he just
and then seeing the Eagles sign Bryce Huff, who I like.
I mean, listen, as I've said before, Huff I like, but I again, he hasn't. We haven't seen him in an expanded role yet. Maybe
he may not be an expanded role guy, and that might be okay too. We'll see.
And he's not exactly, and
he's in the walk year of his contract. Is that what it is?
Redick is.
Yeah. Huff signed a new deal with basically Huff replaces Redick, and the Eagles are hoping Nolan Smith is able to, steps up in year 2. But that's basically what the Eagles were kind of banking on here. But yeah, I get it, Russ. Trust me, it's you get him. If you sign him, you get him on board, and he's on board. He can be absolutely ferocious for your team. But this is the situation. So.
Yep.
Okay, so let me share with you my my little home situation. Now, I obviously, like most people, they have a garage on their house. It's at the side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Our house has a sort of a side door to the side of the garage.
Mm-hmm.
But as everything is currently arranged inside the garage, I have our snowblower basically like maybe a foot or a foot and a half from the door. So you really can't get inside the door if you're a human. So it's, so it's situated that way.
Did you do that intentionally, or you just don't have enough room?
Yes, I did it intentionally. Because obviously I don't want anybody walking in the garage.
Okay,
and the lock on the garage door, the lock on that door, I don't even know if I have a key for, so I don't want to find out. So both garage doors are shut. There is a sort of a cubby hole type of thing to go up to the attic, which nobody has been up to in years. Okay, so both garage doors are shut. All of a sudden, about 2 hours ago, I hear noise coming from the garage. So I go in there and I find the door open maybe a foot more than it normally is, because usually it's open a crack. It's open about a foot more. That wasn't the way I saw it this morning. There is a house plant that is on death's door that I took out of the basement that I'm trying to get back to life.
Mm-hmm.
The dirt has been dug up in the house plant.
Mm-hmm.
a couple pieces of wood that I am going to burn, like those like long divider pieces of wood that you use for like flower beds that are all rotted out. I have him leaning up. I have him leaning up in the corner of the garage. Mm-hmm. One or two of them have been knocked over, and an old edger and trimmer that was up against the wall has been knocked to its side. So I add all that together, and the only conclusion I can come to is either a squirrel, a bird, or my good friend the woodchuck has the
woodchuck is the number one suspect.
Yeah, but the thing is, the woodchuck was not in the garage. So did he open the friggin' door to get out? I don't know.
It's doesn't have thumbs.
Do you get raccoons?
No.
No. Yeah, like what has thumbs? Because that's the only thing that could open the door.
Right, and the woodchuck is not tall enough to open it because there's a door.
Did you think of a monkey?
Monkey, yeah.
Maybe it's a family member who wants you to get rid of the woodchuck, and they let him fly in and cause havoc and have you get rid of it.
I'm going to blame one of your family members too, because how did they open the door unless you left the door open?
I didn't. No, I didn't. But even if I did leave the door open, there's no way that anybody, we have turf tenders, like people who go and when they're going to come over, I leave that door open so they can press the garage door and open the garage door. No, it was nothing. So, I mean, the mystery continues, and nothing was missing. So it wasn't a person that came in, like my bike was not missing.
Something had the force to open the door.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I mean, because even if I was going to say it was a family of moles, they'd all have to group together to somehow open the door.
Get on each other's shoulders.
Because at least they could come up from under the ground.
It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma.
Wait, one other thing.
Okay.
You know how, when it's cold, the ground will expand and something will stay? Maybe the extreme heat has loosened the whole frame of the door and it just popped open.
But that doesn't explain all the other
things. But if the door popped open, then it's open season for Mr. Squirrel, Mr. Woodchuck. You could line up the whole group and interrogate them.
Interrogate, great. I'll shine a light in their face and they say, "Is it safe?" Okay.
That's my hypothesis.
Yeah. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024.
I'm Anthony Mangione from Sunrise Philly.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology and NHLDraftBuzz.com.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Just a programming note, we will not have a show on Friday. Russ will be on his way to Buffalo, where he's never been before, by the way.
Never.
So we're doing a CFL Major League Baseball doubleheader this weekend. The Hamilton Ticats Toronto Argos game in Hamilton. And
this is gonna be a good one.
Yes, I want to see a rouge point there, folks. No, but
I mean the Jets signed an Argo, so he won't be there. But maybe I'll find an old jersey I could buy.
An Argo or an Argo?
I've never been to a CFL game, so I'm actually.
I covered the Grey Cup once, but it was in Ottawa, and that field, for lack of a better term, sucked.
Yeah,
so I'm looking to go to a better stadium and get the better experience.
Is this game in Hamilton or
it's in Hamilton? It's at Tim Hortons, and the funny thing is,
it's in a Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons Stadium. I've been to that stadium before, but I've never been to a CFL game before because that's where I think I don't remember the name of it.
Was it an AHL?
No. It was the Sabres versus Leafs.
Oh,
Hamilton outdoor game.
Right.
A game where the Sabres killed the Leafs, and that was the game where Austin Matthews cross-checked Rasmus Dahlin across the neck and got suspended for 2 games. It was actually a pretty good game until the third period, and then Peter Mrazek turned into Peter Mrazek. Okay, so some news and notes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go through we're going to do a division a show and go through some of the teams in the divisions and ask, what's the biggest question for these teams? But there was some news over the last 48 hours since we did a previous show. The Quinton Byfield contract is an extremely interesting one. for the LA Kings. And in my mind, a great deal for the Kings. Now, Byfield scored 55 points last year. It was his first really successful season. He's growing into a role with the Kings. Clearly, they see him as a center going forward because that was sort of the impetus for the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal to ship him off to Washington for Darcy Kemper. They signed Byfield, Russ, to a 5-year deal at an AAV of 6.25, which, I mean, you'd like to get him locked up for 8 years, but the AAV is wonderful for that player.
Yeah, I mean, so I think he's got a ceiling of 75 points a year. Definitely a number 2 center, maybe a number 1, but he's been getting his tutelage is with Anze Kopitar, and that's good.
Yeah.
So that's clearly had a big effect. When seeing him last year, the difference I saw in him was a little more speed, definitely more strength, because he's been getting bigger every year, and his shot release seems a little faster. So it seems like with most power forwards, it takes a little time, and now the time is now, right? So I expect all these years to kind of go up in production, and yeah, they're paying for future results.
Yeah, of course.
But I think at this rate that they got him at, you got to do it.
Yeah, it's a calculated bet, no question about it. But, it's a long commitment. But again, being the second overall pick in the draft, it's also a way for the LA Kings to say, hey, our patience is being rewarded, and we are, we feel like this is a very good investment. And as the cap continues to go up over the next 8 years of this contract is going to be, they could very well, if he caps out at Russ's number at 75 points a season, 66.5 million AAV is going to look pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Especially as the Kings are going to be hopefully continuing to build around Quinton Byfield. Yeah, a wonderful player. Again, we were trying to figure out if he's going to be a winger or a center, but yeah, I think the full commitment here. And the old story is, again, when you're trying to become an NHL center, there's so many responsibilities that are involved with it that you have to, nuances of the game. And again, if you got the physical advantages that Quinton Byfield has, it certainly helps. Mm-hmm. But it also helps when you have someone to help. Again, the coaching staff's obviously done a pretty good job, but having the base model of a player like an Anze Kopitar to base your game off of, to analyze how he plays and how, Byfield's not the same player as Kopitar.
No,
you could see some similar archetypes. Maybe even more of a point. You could potentially be more of a point producer, maybe a little bit more offensively bent. Although we can't forget how good Kopitar was in his, in his.
Well, I do want to point that out. So, I had a really good introduction to Kopitar when he was playing in the Young Stars game, and I knew of him and I had ranked him, but he was still a raw product back then when he was playing in the Young Stars game. So it did take Kopitar a little while to become Kopitar too.
Right. I mean, the one thing and then the limited times that I saw Byfield last year, I saw him more in the playoffs because, of my rooting for Edmonton to lose. He seemed to be driving the net a lot more. And remember, he's a moose. He's 6'5", 225. He's tough to stop. He can drive the net on smaller defensemen. So he didn't seem to have a hunger for that earlier in his career, but he has seemed to sort of gravitate towards that. And I think maybe the message has been communicated to him. Not many people can stop you from going there, so go there. So, I mean, that's now, the one thing I looked at, remember, he played in the American Hockey League as an 18-year-old because the OHL had been shut down. And I always wondered with some of these players like Jack Quinn with the Sabres, whether that would adversely affect them going forward. And he was sort of slow to, really grow. But I think it's more the fact, like you said, he's a power forward and power forwards develop slower. So, yeah. Now, the only thing I would say is this is a sort of a, if you look at Slavkovsky, he signed the 8-year deal. LA, I think, was happy because of maybe some of the money that they have tied up in the short term to get him on a lower deal, because at the end of the 5 years, Doughty and Kopitar will be off the books and they can pay him then if he blossoms into a big player, they can pay him that big money. So
there's a chance for us that they could rip up part of the contract and then extend extend, or it's up to the Kings as to what they want to do based off of his production.
Right, they can extend him with a year left. So
exactly.
Okay, so that's one item. The Evgeny Kuznetsov termination has occurred. He had a year left in his contract. 50% was with the Washington Capitals and 50% was with the Hurricanes. And I think the Hurricanes gave up a 3rd round pick for him, so it wasn't a big price. Maybe there was some knowledge that he was going to do this anyway, but I'll just say this: the Capitals got to be ecstatic that they get almost $4 million off their books, Anthony. Because
absolutely, yeah, this is a great situation for them, and I do wonder whether or not this was always sort of in the back pocket for Kuznetsov to go back to SKA, and maybe again Carolina's trying to load up for a potential cup run, have a skill forward. But as we all saw, he was eventually being healthy scratched in the postseason. Right. So it was almost to the point where Carolina took a chance, just didn't quite. He's not quite the player he was during the run up to the Caps Cup. So again, they have to be ecstatic. I'm sure the offer from SKA is financially such that, normally under those circumstances, you don't rip up a $6 million, near $6 million payday, right, unless you're getting some serious money coming back the other way. Plus, again, it gives Scott obviously a potential, additional top level weapon as they're trying to compete obviously for a Gagarin Cup. So, again, to me, it's obviously great for the Caps. It gives them flexibility. It gives them some opportunity. Again, we're past now the market, the free agency market now. So, for this off season, it doesn't quite have as much of an effect, but, something shakes loose, another opportunity, a trade of some sort, having that flexibility certainly will help the Caps as they're trying to, I don't want to call it a rebuild, but it's because as long as you've got, Alexander Ovechkin there, it's never going to be quite a rebuild, but at least a reappropriation of resources, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, right now the Caps are going to be so far into LTIR because of Oshie and because of Backstrom. I mean, with those two players, they're almost 15 million in LTIR. So the fact that 3.9 was opened up, it really does. It just means they're less into LTIR than they would have been.
Correct.
So, I mean, they're trying to remake that team sort of on the fly while they have Ovechkin and I think
they've done a pretty good job.
They've done a solid job. I'm going to say it's been a solid all season for them. So the key thing for Carberry is going to be getting getting those new parts to fit properly. Right. It's one thing to acquire them. It's another thing to become.
He's a pretty good coach, though. I like him.
I've liked Carberry from his AHL days. I liked him in Hershey. He's always been, he's a part of that sort of Washington Hershey family. So he knows the organization particularly well, even from leaving and going to Toronto for a couple seasons as an assistant coach. Right. Carberry's always been on the short list of coaches. my whole situation with him is he getting in on Washington at a time when they're kind of potentially on a little bit of a downslide towards the back end of Ovechkin's career, but maybe not. Maybe the Caps end up being better than we think they're going to be, and they are going to be able to.
They might be propping themselves up for the next 2-3 years still.
And again, if Ovi's having a good offseason in terms of in terms of maybe being in a better spot preparation wise, maybe you have to take the Caps seriously in this circumstance.
Yeah, a couple things in the chat before we get into our divisional thing. Randy Flamester was asking about about Rasmus Andersson and him potentially being traded, and one of the other people in the chat said Rasmus Andersson to Toronto. If we've learned anything from the last year, Calgary will not trade with Toronto unless Toronto overpays to the point of ridiculousness. So I don't think that'll happen. I mean, Anderson's got another this year and next year at $4.5 million. I think he's a good defenseman, but I don't think they're going to pay through the nose to get Rasmus Andersson. So I would hesitate at that possibility. The other thing, Russ, and you answered it, is, I mean, the Trouba thing. Again, I don't get it. I don't understand why they're trying to hustle him out of New York. It's not happening. I don't think it's happening.
His feet are firmly stuck in the ground for obvious reasons for his family.
Yeah.
And he's not going anywhere. So, like, whether fans want him to go or not doesn't really matter.
And it also how that the room views him as well. All it's going to matter there is if management is trying to move him, but I think the man would not be team captain if he doesn't have some level of as Mox in the room. So when he comes back in there, it'll just be like, okay, this is what we did. I mean, manager could feel the way they want to feel about the situation and trying to move him, but you know.
I was going to say, I could give a TJ Oshie update because I've been watching him closely for the last year and change. Look, last year was a tough year for him, and he came back from multiple injuries and just wasn't right. I saw an interview with him maybe like a week ago where he is saying that he's trying to make it back. It sounds a lot like Backstrom. So I think we're not going to find out whether he's retired or not, and he won't retire because he'll still get paid.
Right.
We'll decide. It'll be decided in camp.
Yeah.
He'll go to camp, and then he'll figure out if he can play or not. I think that's what's happening with him.
Right. And the other thing along those lines that I forgot about, and I'll just mention quickly, the Torrey Krug situation where it seems to be an arthritic condition, and I think it was his ankle, and that they're going to give it 6 to 8 weeks, which would bring it right up to the beginning of training camp. And then once training camp, obviously he has to pass medically to play at that point. If it's not a situation where he can play, then you're talking about him basically, he's not retired, but he's, he can't play now.
In Ryan Ellisville, basically. And the crazy part is we all know last offseason, the Flyers were in conversations with St. Louis and Krug. Krug twice now. Now that both first obviously with Philly and now obviously with Anaheim, where he said no to trades in both of those circumstances, but Philly, considering what they just went through with, obviously still technically going through, obviously, with Ryan Ellis.
Yeah.
And then if they acquire Krug and have the same situation happen again, oh my goodness gracious.
So two things here. I'm going to answer Terry 3G in the nicest possible way because he doesn't understand why Trouba's wife would practice in New York over Toronto. It's New York. Anthony can answer to that because his wife went to school.
I went to medical school there. It's this is where she chose to do a residency, and and as my wife can speak to, in this circumstances, as I told her about this situation, she says, you're talking about residency. It's extreme. She delayed me. It's extreme. Once you're committed, you got to get through and finish it.
Yeah.
She had a year. This is a circumstance where they have a young child. They don't want to be separated in this circumstance and going to the sea while she finishes the residency. It's tough. You could say, "Oh, hire somebody to help." No, guys. No, this is a circumstance where I understand. This is the reason why the player asks for this in the contract.
Right.
It's entirely on the team if they want to offer it or not. If they do, then you have to accept the terms of the marriage.
Right. I don't know where her residency is, but in terms of how many top end hospitals in from Sloan Kettering to whatever in New York City,
regardless of the situation, Mike. It's for people who don't know. It's extremely as the spouse of someone who was in residency. It's extremely difficult for those changes to be made, and and that just because it's not convenient to the team you root for. This is the real world, people. This is how this is, and that's what he requested in this contract, and that's that. And
if this wasn't a factor, I believe there would be a number of teams that would be interested in it.
Definitely.
Of course,
Toronto would knock themselves silly to try to get a Trouba. That's a type of guy that they would love to have.
With Krug, I wanted to mention what worried me is the arthritis part. To me, it seems like he is destined to get this surgery and miss the season, and I don't see any way around it. I'd be shocked if he plays this year.
And we still have not had any kind of answer or resolution or anything on the Yanni Hakanpää scenario in Toronto, because we still don't even know if he was signed to a contract. It has not been.
We'll find out when camp opens and which camp he's going to report to. And
I do wonder whether or not there was an initial agreement. There was. I don't know if pen to paper was signed.
Right.
And maybe he had to go through. I'm sure before a contract is signed, they have to go through a physical first.
Well, that was the thing. Steve Simmons reported that the Leafs medical staff had checked him out. But apparently what each team does is that they have an exit medical evaluation from the previous team.
Mm-hmm.
And if the previous team sent them a notification saying, okay, well, he has a knee injury, but it should be good, then they probably said, oh yeah, that's good. Okay, we trust the Dallas Stars, and then find out it's
then that's on you know, you
right,
need to do your own evaluation.
They've never announced it, so it was reported, but it's never been announced.
They may be in this weird sort of limbo state here with him, but if
we'll
he
find
hasn't
out.
been,
Like when camp
again,
opens,
if he hasn't been formally announced, just because it was reported,
right,
does not mean that until you see the press release that says he's been signed,
right,
he may not be a Leaf in
if
this.
he's in Dallas camp, and then all of a sudden they say he's going on LTIR, then you'll know.
Right. Two other quick things, Russ. You wanted to bring up the news about Kolosov.
Yeah, Anthony and I will both talk about it. I mean, my experience has been as far as players in Russia, especially since now that they had this new designation.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing in that whole thing was we will honor contracts, but it's not like they have to.
Right.
There's nothing. It's a signed contract, but they can come up with a million fake reasons why he thinks he should break the contract and try and get the Flyers to just loan him for another year because he doesn't want to come to the States. So it just doesn't look good for him coming this year. They'll own his rights, but I don't think he's coming.
We'll need to see again. We're going to need to obviously things will come to a head when we get this training camp in September. Him not coming obviously over for the developmental camp and. You know, as was reported, sleeping through the flights, which again, you have to be. I will say this about the website that reported it, that it's been also a site that sometimes that is hit or miss on correctness of news. That being said, I still
practice with
the fact that the player physically isn't there, and the Flyers have already been through the Cutter Gauthier situation, where a player didn't report and everybody's wondering what the reason why it happened, and then things come out. You are understandably jaded in that circumstance. And if you look at the Flyers situation, you look at their goaltending situation right now, obviously the main club. And I do wonder, again, he came over, he signed his contract prior to Ivan Fedotov coming over. Correct. Now Fedotov has signed a 2-year contract, which
we talked about. He got a lot of money.
He got a good chunk of money, more than obviously what Sam Ersson has on his extension. So the pathway, unless Fedotov
does he want to play? Does he want to play with Dynamo Minsk or does he want to play in Lehigh?
I think that's really what it's probably coming down to. Is that I think he wanted at least to feel like maybe, and this is just my own interpretation of this. I'm not saying this is what he said, but the read to me is when he signed a contract, he probably thought I'd have it because of the Flyers goaltending situation and Hartnell not going to be there, that there's a possibility of him being on the NHL, having a shot at the NHL roster. The minute they bring Ivan Fedotov over and they sign Fedotov to a 2-year deal, that meant at this point then that he was going to be in Lehigh. And again, whatever occurred over those few weeks that he was in Lehigh, again, he is a kid. If there's nobody there that sort of he can converse with, maybe again coming from Minsk to Lehigh was a massive culture shock for him as well. What maybe the onboarding wasn't as airtight as it maybe should be.
The Flyers haven't said boo, so we don't have any.
The Flyers don't. It's just it wasn't there at camp. But again, that's something that is not going to be addressed to and answered to until we get to training camp.
The other foreshadowing thing, Ant, was when they brought Parker Gahagen back. To me, that was like that's their insurance policy in case Kolosov's not there. They have to have another goalie. So I think they did that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a fail-safe, which tells me they're concerned now.
They're not 100% he's coming. They're not.
They're not. That to me, yeah. When you make that kind of a move, and it's always you look for those type of acquisitions. They still have Cal Peterson in this circumstance under at least another year. There's no indication, obviously, that they're going to buy him out. Briere pretty much said Briere said we're leaning towards no pressure him for buying out Peterson. So
why would you? I mean, you've got.
Especially now if you don't have Kolosov, you're going to have to keep Peterson in place as well.
That was the other thing too, and we had brought this up on Locked On Flyers. Yeah. I thought Kolosov would get a playoff game. He didn't get a playoff game.
He didn't. Yeah, it was either a short note, and again, they didn't put him in at all. They did, and I guess, and then is that can be the coach's call in this circumstance, and watching him in practice maybe, and there's certain things maybe they feel like there's certain things that he still has to work on before we put him out there in a game that means our season. As much as we want to talk about development in the AHL, they're also, once you get to the postseason, at this point now you're trying to win.
Yeah, and
that's a part that we have to keep in mind with that.
And keeping Peterson buys them a year. I mean, they have was it Carson Bjarnason?
Bjarnason will be probably he's got at least another year. He's got at least one more year in junior. He was at developmental camp, so he's got at least another year in junior.
And he was selected for Team USA for their summer showcase.
Canada.
Or Team Canada. I'm
Canada,
sorry. Yeah. I've said Canada. I said U.S. instead of Canada twice.
Well, and Zavragin, I think, has 2 years left on his.
Well, he's just coming up, and I think the word was he's getting, as we all knew. Even I know he was signed by. He was brought up to SKA. He's now, I believe, heading to Sochi. He's going to be going to Sochi to start.
Right.
So and they're doing that even before the season begins, so that he already knows. So he gets obviously KHL playing time. And again, we're going to need to see. Obviously, Zavragin has obviously great numbers, obviously in the NHL, but we're going to need to see how he looks, obviously at the pro level in this circumstance. So,
yep. All right. Let's talk about the Metro Division. We'll go through the teams quickly here. The Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, obviously, there's been some mass defections. We've seen Brady Shea leave. We've seen Brett Pesce leave. The Neckish or Nietzsche situation, I keep missing. I mean, I keep hearing different pronunciations, so I'm going to go with Neckish because that's what I've said all the time.
It could be. Yeah, it's like sometimes the K-A-S, sometimes with the CKAS or something like that.
But they
pronounce it differently. Yeah.
They brought in Martinuk and Roslovic and William Carrier, Sean Walker. There's been a lot of changes there. The goaltending is
Gostisbehere. Is Gostisbehere still there?
Gostisbehere
signed with them. I mean, they've really leaned into.
Yes.
I mean, they're considering who their general manager is. I'm not even remotely surprised that they leaned that hard into puck rushing defensemen as they did, and they got Walker. I thought Walker was signed for a tremendous price.
Yeah,
3 years in there. But again, he's looking probably just for a place to settle down. But I thought he was going to get an even bigger number when he got traded from Philly to Colorado.
And I think the best deal of them all is they got Slavin extended for 8 years at $6.4 million.
He's their bedrock. So yeah.
So now, to me, after all these changes, and we don't know what.
Mm-hmm. I know where you're headed.
What they haven't changed is the friggin' goaltending.
Yes,
and I'm sorry, unless you're prepared to say Kochetkov is your number one and you go with him, and Freddie Anderson, who's got a year left in his contract, you play him, whatever. But as long as they have Freddie Anderson there, they really have, they have sort of a net to fall back on, okay? Because what Freddie, if he's healthy,
right?
Freddie Anderson is.
He's serviceable.
Right, he's serviceable. But Russ, my problem is I don't know what this team is going to be as long as they keep going back to guys who are not going to win. And Kochetkov is a guy that might give them a chance to win. But until they straighten out their goaltending, I don't think this team's ever going to win. That's my big question with them.
Yeah, I mean, they were fourth in goals against. So even though we bitch about their goaltending, they have good enough defense that they've been able to fight that off. But
the big thing for Carolina always, it seems to get them is of all things with all their with their firepower, their power play fails them in the second round almost every single time. When they get into a critical series, when that power play goes, they struggle. And that's really, in many ways, the I feel like the story for Carolina is and again, you go to look at now they're focused in on maybe they feel like the point play needs to be better. So you go and get a Walker, you go and get a Gostisbehere. So for me, the question is, can those two players supercharge that power play, not only now during the regular season, but when they really need it in the playoffs?
Yeah, I would say the big thing is, they're just behind the Rangers, but we're ahead of Florida Florida, and that was my Long Island accent coming out, in goals per game. But the problem is, like during the regular season, they had 11 shorthanded goals. That never carries over to the playoffs. Maybe you get a few. And just them scoring at the same rate in the playoffs doesn't seem to carry over either. So while those changes are good at 5-on-5, I don't know if it's going to help them.
I don't know either. And that's the problem is like they get – and again, I felt like one of their best opportunities to potentially win it was not last season, but the year before when Florida first got to the final. That seemed to me to be the sort of their close to their best version. It could be good here because I think Walker is he's good defense. I think he's good enough defensively. That's the thing. I think that's probably where you could see him as an upgrade in that circumstance, that his overall defensive play, especially since he's coming into the prime of his career, that could be good. And then you're using obviously Gostisbehere on the potentially in the second power play, or even on top. Well, it's something that's going to be interesting to watch. They lose Teravainen. He goes back to Chicago. That's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out.
I'm less bullish on them this year. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and the guy I keep looking at, I mean, he has killed a team that I cover in the past in the playoffs, but the Kotkaniemi deal could be one of the worst contracts in the NHL based on production, based on bang for the buck.
It has not aged well.
It is not at all. But okay, so next is the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I mean, you go with coaching. I'll take the low-hanging fruit. The Patrick Laine situation, to me, I mean, if he had a year left in the contract, I think he'd be traded already. The obvious, whatever is going on in terms of in terms of his situation off the ice, that he is in the NHLPA. I can't think of you know what I'm talking about. It's
players assistance.
Players assistance. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what the issue is, and obviously a team that would be interested in him would have to want to know what exactly is going on. I don't know whether they can actually find out, but I think the problem here is he's got 2 years left. He's making $8.7 million, and you don't know if this is the guy who scored 40 goals or the guy who disappears for long stretches. So
or the truth is both.
Right.
This is the reality of Patrick Laine, that if you get him at full commitment, he could be an absolute terror on the ice. But you just don't know exactly. Again, it's for all the physical tools of Patrick Laine, the mind trumps the body. And in this circumstance, he's got to get right with himself first before, and that's something that teams are going to be obviously looking at there. What they can know or what they're allowed to know. I'm sure that's a big part of this program, is that that's not meant for you to know at the end of the day. I'm not being realistically, can stuff be said quietly, not exactly legally.
Right.
We all know how the world works. But in reality, it's not something that's designed to be leaked out.
I would say that two things. Like Pascal Vincent going to Laval was good because he was dealt a bad hand, and then he's trying to act like Babcock, and none of that worked out. And I think there was just undue pressure on him for those kinds of things to work out. So what I worry about with Vincent is that I think he's potentially a good coach who may end up in a similar situation to Todd Nelson, that he ends up in the A and opportunities go by and he's just not mentioned in them.
The book has already been written on him, so to speak.
And I think Nelson certainly, with his run in Hershey, deserves.
He's won 2 Calder Cups in a row, and he can't. The other part is, though, they look. I don't think they should be hiring a middle of the line coach like they're going for, and I think that's going to be problematic because they have some players there that. The Fantillis, the Goudreaus, you can say what you want about Goudreau, but he's still a really good player. Fantilli is going to keep getting much better every year. And I feel like the coaches.
Kate Lindstrom in the long run.
Yeah, and Lindstrom. I feel like the coaches that they're hiring are just like these in-between coaches. Now, you could say what you want about Woodcroft, but he did get fired last year for a reason. He did have
I will say this though: the Oilers did, under him initially when he first was brought in, did have have an improvement in play, but then as things sort of extended over time,
right,
it wasn't working.
He was trying to push defense first; it didn't work.
Right.
If he tries to push defense first in Columbus, it's not going to work.
No.
Again, and now the key thing that I look at with Woodcroft is that the best coaches are the ones who can adapt their philosophy to the personnel that they have. Yeah. So that's, to me, going to be the question. So I can't tell you that Jay Woodcroft would not be a good
I just don't think
coach with that team.
It wouldn't be my choice. Like, I don't feel like it's a great choice. But then Dean Evason seems abrasive with management. Like, I think there was problems with him in Minnesota, and that's why
I think he's a guy who got the players seemed like and I may be wrong on this, but it seemed like the players liked him,
right,
in Minnesota. But
it didn't seem like management did.
It didn't seem like management did, and that's something that you have to take. Yeah, I mean, Mike.
No, I'm not, and that's not the feel. Like Guerin, sounded like he really did not want to fire him, but maybe there was pressure from ownership that he had to. I mean, they went with Hines, and it really didn't change that much. So, I mean, that team was a flawed team, and when you have $14 million in dead cap space because you bought out two old guys like Parise and Suter, that's gonna kill you.
Another Chuck Fletcher mess.
Yeah, I'll tell you the one encouraging thing for Columbus, though, I think. Are the young Russians that they had, Marchenko and Voronkov. They played pretty well.
Yeah, Marchenko's not signed, though.
No, he is. They signed him.
They finally signed him? What was the amount?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, Chinnikov is the one that signed.
I was going to say Chinnikov was.
Yeah, Marchenko, they need Marchenko for goals.
But I found it hilarious that Sean Monahan signed the same length remaining on his new deal that was Goudreau's got 5 years and he signed a 5-year contract. So don't tell me that didn't have anything to do with each other.
No.
Why
would we think that?
No, not at all. Of course not. Okay, the New Jersey Devils, boy, I mean, Sheldon Keefe. Gee, I didn't have goaltending in Toronto. Now I've got Markstrom and Allen. Now I have Brett Pesce and Dillon added to Dougie Hamilton, Siegenthaler, Hughes.
Thomas Tatar.
Tatar's good too for them.
Yep.
My big question again for the Devils, because I think the Devils, with the changes that they've made, should make the playoffs, is whether they can avoid the big injury. With Hughes, there's no question that Hughes is one of the most talented players in the league. There's no question Nico Hischier, if he stays healthy, is one of the best two-way forwards in the league. Last year, they were killed because Hamilton got hurt and because Hughes and Hischier got hurt for long stretches. If they stay healthy, they're making the playoffs. But that's the big question for me.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And again, and in many ways, they should be theoretically improved. Right. With better goaltending in this circumstance. That was the big thing that kind of robbed them in the Rangers series a couple of years ago, was the fact they just didn't have the goaltending wasn't quite up to snuff to match with New York. So yeah, if everybody's healthy, the Devils should be a postseason team. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, the combination with the Devils was we all knew the goaltending wasn't great, but after Hamilton went down, they had good young defensemen. They're just all too young. And that's why I didn't like when they got rid of
it was a lot for them, and you get the and you get the changing. Again, obviously things start falling apart with Lindy.
And that's why I didn't like them getting rid of Severson, because he was a rock solid bedrock guy for them. Now this year they all have the experience, all the young guys. Now again, sorry Devils fans, Luke Hughes really does need to rein it in defensively. He's a terrific offensive player, but he does turn it over a little bit too much, and he does have the puck a little too much. If that gets better, they'll make the playoffs, because I'm not worried about their goaltending as much as just, getting the right defense going. And the big injury, every team could say that.
Yeah, but Lindy said it in his introductory press conference in Buffalo here. It's like it was one thing to have to play Nemec and have to play Hughes because Hamilton was out. And then on top of that, he had another guy in Kevin Ball who didn't have a lot of experience. So he had half of his defense that did not have a lot of experience.
That's Lindy's job to make them better. Like, sorry, Lindy, you don't get to gripe about that.
No, he did. And on top of that, he didn't have the goaltending, and that he couldn't fall back on that either. So, he's not going to have those excuses in Buffalo with Byram, Power, and Dahlin.
On got a text from Alexei Zhitnik. He said baloney.
Yes, as he's hitting the glass behind the net because he can't keep it 20 feet above, 20 feet below. The Rangers, Russ. My big question, besides what the hell was Chris Drury thinking when he traded for Riley Smith, is how much is Igor Shesterkin going to get?
He'll get between 10.5 and 12, and he's going to get it, and they're going to pay him because you could always say it's too much money for a goalie, but it's not easy being a goalie in New York. You could ask someone like Mike Dunham, who was a terrific goalie with Nashville when he went to New York, didn't really work out great. So it's a hard market for goaltending. They've always had great goaltending for most of their existence. I mean, there's only been a couple of areas like the Dunham era and that weren't really good. So he's going to get it. People have seen what he's worth to the team. Now, the other big thing is, look, they got Chad Ruido, so their defense is a lot. No, I'm kidding. But they did what they needed to do with Schneider. I think Lindgren, they still have to make the deal for. Their defense will be fine. They re-signed Matthew Robertson, who could be a key because he's a big physical defenseman and probably deserves a shot at some point. I think with Lafreniere now doing what he's doing, I think you could expect more from Zibanejad, Panarin. I think they're still better than the Devils. I still think they're better than the Hurricanes because it's Shesterkin. He's going to make up the slack that whoever is not having that year, that career year, he does make up the difference. But right now they're in a pretty good spot. Sure, Laviolette gets that first year bump with teams. We know that.
We do.
But I feel like I'm not going to say he's changed his methods because he hasn't, but I feel like he can kind of let up a little bit on him being like the hard guy, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to curse because he's got so many veterans that actually.
You can say hard ass. That's not going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, that's fine. So
hard MFer.
There's a lot of veterans he could trust there, and I think that's a key thing.
He's more comfortable with a veteran-laden team too.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's where it works for him.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, that to me is, and the key thing also is, again, we talk about Shesterkin, but I think also they got some pretty good goaltending out of Jonathan Quick last year as well. When we all really thought you could leave him. I mean, that was
all shocked at that.
Yeah, and that's the thing for New York is for those times that Igor may have a little bit of a dip, having a reliable backup like Quick, I think goes a pretty long way.
A guy he could talk to, like that's a wealth of knowledge there too.
Yeah, exactly. And he's probably, I think John's probably at the point of his career where he's, knowing that he's no longer an NHL starter, is more likely to expound on his own experiences versus when he's trying to hold on to the throne like he was in LA.
I say this to Andrew Perry goes, stop it. He won't get more than Vasilevsky. That was a few years ago. The cap has gone up. Andrew Perry is saying that.
Oh, about his contract, about Igor's contract.
And remember,
hold your breath, Andrew, because you'll be holding it for a long time.
Vasilevsky took 9.5 in Florida with no state tax.
Yeah,
and Bobrovsky got 10 in Florida, the state of Florida, with no state tax.
Right.
In New York, with their tax up the wazoo, it's 12. And I mean, I don't
between 10.5 and 12.
I mean, I hate that. I hate this system, but unfortunately, that these
teams have leveraged it because that's something that the National Hockey League did not take into account was the state income tax.
Correct.
And they should take consideration in that in the new CBA, but will they? No. Okay, the New York Islanders. Gee, Lou, what's your big problem? And what didn't you remedy in the offseason? You can't score friggin' goals, and all you did was Anthony Duclair. There it is.
I think there's still potential movement for the Islanders that's out there if they decide to pursue it. I think they're in the market for Ehlers. That would not be a bad addition for them.
I agree. That's smart.
Again, I think that requires. I know they've been talking about. There have been conversations, I believe, Russ, between them and about Pajot, between them and the.
I haven't heard
Ottawa. I've heard about that. About possibly Ottawa again.
So they're finally going to throw in the towel on that Pajot deal that was bad.
It looked good. It was great the first year. It gave them a good amount of center depth, but it was definitely at the end of the day. An overshot in terms of what his financial value is to what his role is.
I would say this.
If they add a score, I would say in this circumstance, Mike, if they can add a score, then they're right in it. They need one. They need another piece.
I'm not worried about Sorokin bouncing back, Russ, because I think he's one of the best goalies in the league. I mean, he had a hiccup at the end of the year, and they went with Varlamov because Roy trusted Varlamov from his days in Colorado. My big question is Dobson in the new deal. He won't
get it here.
Well, I mean, he signed a bridge. He's 2 years away from UFA. Is Lou going to sign him to another 2-year bridge and then let him walk in 2 years?
No, they'll sign him.
No, they'll see how he plays this season.
He'll get a deal next summer. That's when he'll
get it. Yeah, that's how I read that situation, Mike. The Dobson, he has another good season. Is that if his trajectory continues on an upward sweep, which it looks like it is. Right. That's a deal you get done next summer. I mean, that's fine. You got to get your financial ducks in a row at that point, and also when you've got potentially more cap space at that point too.
A couple things. Sorry about the Islanders. So, yeah, Sorokin will have a bounce back year. I'm not worried about that. The fact that they re-signed Simon Holmstrom, who had a good year, there is a little bit more meat on the bone there than I initially thought. And so I think he was 15-10. If he could get to 20 goals, that helps them a lot.
It does.
He wasn't that far away from it. So Holmstrom could be a nice little boost. Duclair's going to score 25 goals with the Islanders. He will. He scored 25 goals everywhere.
The only thing he does, Russ, is he takes Pierre Engvall out of the top 6, and that'll
probably help them.
Yes.
Yeah. That's actually a good thing because I think Engvall slots into a role that's more befitting. And again, everybody talks about the length of his contract. His cap hit is such where it's like if he slots down into a third line role, that's fine. I mean, you don't like term on a role player too much, but
as Kevin has said many a times, with the cap going up to $88 million, $3 million is an average salary. So
yeah, we're getting to that point now, and that's where the projection is.
Okay, I'll let you guys take the lead on the Flyers. What is the big question with the Flyers going?
I'll let Anthony go first. I'll go second.
I think obviously question number one for Flyer fans is going to be how does Matvei Michkov do in his first year as a Flyer? The question is who's he going to be? Who will be potentially his partners? Who are they looking at to put him on the line? I think that's going to be a very experimental thing for Philadelphia. You play him with Morgan Frost? Do you play him with Sean Couturier in this circumstance? The idea that Couturier plays too slow. If you've ever watched Michkov play, it's not blazing speed. He's just thinking the game at a very high level. But, do the Flyers have, you got to have sort of the right combination of players, I think, to really we're going to need to see what exactly Matvei Michkov is. We know he's we know offensively he's going to take chances. How is he going to handle things at the other end? Yes. And that's where the patience and the growth will have to be seen in the first 1, potentially 2 years of his contract. Because again, he still is 18, 19 years old in this circumstance, and there's still room for him to grow. So, but on that, Flyers' weaknesses obviously at center. They're center. They're at least one center short of being a truly competitive team in that division. That's a matchup problem for them. Sean Couturier's, how physically, is he going to be now a year removed from recovering from his back injuries, what the relationship is. And obviously John Tortorella is the son that everything seems to revolve around, and how does he handle things? So there's multiple questions really, if you're looking at the Flyers going into this season.
Yeah. My two other things, Anthony covered a lot. My two other things would be, there's no Carter Hart to start the season, and Sam Ersson has never started a season. Yeah. And so we don't know if he's going to, start off hot and pick up where he left off.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question mark. And Fedotov even as a number 2.
We don't know yet. He's the great unknown. He's the great unknown for Philly. If they get solid goaltending from Fedotov that can somewhat approach what they got from Hart, but that's a big ask.
Yeah, I know.
There's no indication yet. I mean, he's a big. We all said it when he got the contract. He's got a big summer ahead of him to get himself onboarded quickly to make this worth it.
I know he was dropped in at the end of the season into a.
Yeah, it was unfair. The whole thing
was unfair, but he was the game I saw him in Buffalo. He was horrible.
Yeah. So, then the other factor. There's one more factor. I do think teams took the Flyers a little light last year at the start of the season.
That's gonna be. They're gonna know now that the Flyers, and that's where. When you have a dearth of where your younger players are going to have to take yet another step forward. It's not just Michkov. How does Owen Tippett look? How does Bobby Brink look?
Farabee, all of them.
Farabee, depending on what happens, obviously with Joel Farabee, if he's still with the team, which I think there's still a good chance of that being that he's going to be in. And
Mike, you didn't ask about Konechny's potential $10 million deal, which I would be very against it for $10 million.
Well, yeah, no, I mean. We'll cover that later, but I think the one that you guys didn't cover is, can Jamie Drysdale stay healthy? I think that's
only his doctor knows.
To me, it's like
that's the key. He's been banged up a few times. Again, he's still young. Sometimes you go early in your career and you get through, a couple. You get through some nagging things, which are maybe a little more than nagging for him. And then sometimes you're able to take off after that. But in other cases, if
he's a gamer, tremendous talent, but I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Okay, two more to go here. The Pittsburgh Penguins. We know Kyle Dubas is in a situation where he can't rebuild because he's got Crosby, Malkin, and Letang there. It sounds like Crosby is going to sign an extension to stay there for the remainder of his career. I'd like to know, what the hell were you thinking when you traded for Kevin Hayes? Because that deal makes absolutely.
It's a pure. I look at the Kevin Hayes acquisition as just Jeff Carter. We don't have. We're just trying to replace Jeff Carter somehow, some way, and that Hayes is younger. He's a big center.
It won't be hard
to me. That's all that acquisition was to me.
Right. It won't be hard to replace Carter's numbers from last year.
No, right, exactly. Hayes may be in from a production standpoint. Hayes is potentially an improvement in those numbers.
Yeah, the other moves that they made, you add Beauvillier at a cheap contract. You pull the RVs there another year. You added Grzelcyk for 1 year. You re-signed Nedeljkovic. Okay, those are all fine. I mean, I just don't know.
Grzelcyk's good, Mike. That's
the one acquisition that they made this offseason where I was like, Grzelcyk's a solid. Good. That's a good, solid.
Yeah, he's a good bottom pairing defenseman. That helps. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how
good. I'm going to say, look, their wings aren't clipped, but I don't expect them to make the playoffs. But I'll tell you what's weird. I do think it's weird that the Crosby negotiations have gone on this long. I do find that odd.
It's interesting because the question is, I think, if you're Pittsburgh, it's a combination, I think, both for the player and the team that, they know they're closer to the end. How do you want this to finish? Right. How does Sid want this to finish?
Right.
Is he finishing off the last several years of career? If he's finishing in Pittsburgh, it's great that he's loyal. It's old school. That's certainly in this circumstance, and the Penguins allow it to happen. Many ways, it's kind of like almost like a Bobby Clark kind of situation where, even Philly was kind of sort of in a weird spot in 82 and going forward with they were beginning to change things over. But I just look at Sid. If he looks at it and he goes, I want one last crack at a cup.
It's not going to be there.
And it's not going to, and there's a good chance it's not going to be in Pittsburgh. Does he stretch this out as long as possible and then try to pull off a Bork-like run?
Well, I mean, the question
does Sidney Crosby have a kid that has to play for the Penguins and then he could opt out and then find more money?
Well, that's a weird situation. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one is the Washington Capitals. Okay, again, low-hanging fruit. Will Ovechkin break Gretzky's record this season? I say yes.
I think so. I think he's going to – my read on Ovi is I think I think there's going to be a little bit of an existential thing with him where he was like, I now know I need to be locked in, prepared going into the season. All photographs and indications coming out of Russia was that he looks like he's having a strong summer of preparation. He looks like just overall physical sizing is a little bit down. Looks like maybe a little bit of weight came off. And again, he's lost some muscle. And I think you get to a certain point where that muscle at his age slows you down.
Right.
He needs to be able to, if he's trying to beat this record, you need to be still able to get some level of quickness into that spot in order to be able to do, because the man can still score. He still has his hands. Those are the last things that go. The skating goes before the hands go.
He had 8 goals at the All-Star break, and he ended up with 32. I mean, so second half when
if he picks up where he left off, he's going to have a full-blown assault on the record.
Right.
And you hope that happens. You genuinely do.
Yeah,
he's one of the all-time greats. You want to see it be possible.
I'm not as convinced, but I think it's 50-50 now because he did finish strong. That's the way I look at it.
If he had Russ, if he really dipped last season, like alarmingly so, it was a half-season dip, and then he was able to bring it on. If he's coming into this year and he had that lack of a better word, a come to Jesus moment where I can't let up. If I want this record, I cannot let up. I
only worry about injury because it's about that age that he's at where guys never really had bad injuries, that sometimes it could crop up.
Yeah.
So that's why
that's always going to be. There's always that risk.
If you look at the Capitals as a playoff team, I think everything they did in this offseason was close to brilliant, and
it looks good on paper. I'd be no question of that. And and if I add again, as we talked about before the show, if we add Carberry having having a full season and can get those pieces coalesced in pretty short order,
they
should be a playoff team.
The Charlie Lindgren, Logan Thompson pairing is a little questionable, but I mean, not as much as Darcy Kemper and him.
No, it's better.
I still think it's better in this circumstance. Yeah.
The other big question for me is, can they get Chychrun signed on an extension? And if you
you don't worry about that for this year.
No, you don't worry about it. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the money that's dropping off after next year in terms of Backstrom and Oshie, that's $15 million.
Yeah,
they have the cap space to be able to sign him to.
They do. I don't think he'll stay there. I think Chychrun has his own plan, and that's why they're getting him. I think for this year, and I don't think he's staying.
Okay. All right. Good job, guys. We'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Anthony Mangione, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.